children of Israel crossed the Jordan and they destroyed Jericho, the first city. And then when they went to Ai, they failed in the attempt and they lost many of the soldiers because it turned out that there was sin in the camp. And we know the story of Achan and the destruction of his family as the result of that sin. And then Joshua goes back and leads them and destroys Ai. The men of Gibeon heard about it, and unlike the other nations in the area that heard, they decided it was best to make peace with these people instead of fighting them. So they tricked them into believing that they lived somewhere far outside the land of Canaan, because God had told Joshua not to form any treaties with none of the nations in the land. So they tricked them, put on some old clothes and get some stale bread and thing, and journeyed on foot, and told them that they were traveling for many days, coming from far, and that they wanted to make treaty with them. And of course, the elders of Israel went ahead without consulting the Lord and made treaty with them, made covenant with them. So in chapter 10, it picks up from there that the other 5 kings in about a 40-mile radius from where they were staying decided that they ought to come together and join forces and attack Gibeon, one of theirs, because if a big important city like Gibeon came together with Joshua's army, then, you know, it would be all over by the shouting. And so it says, the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, saying, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us. For all the kings of the Amorites that live in the hill country have assembled against us." So Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the valiant warriors. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. Not one of them shall stand before you." So Joshua came upon them suddenly by marching all night from Gilgal. And the Lord confounded them before Israel, and he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and pursued them by the way of the ascent of Beth Horon. And it struck them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. Well, let me stop there. You know, one of the things about living the sanctified life, about going through, like all of us do, the process of sanctification, is that we have to know who the enemy is. Now, when you look at the story I just read, coming from the background where you get a mission from God, but then the elders made a mistake. They didn't consult God concerning the covenant they made with the people of Gibeon. Okay, they got it wrong. Now, because of this, they now have to keep covenant by coming to their aid when the Gibeonites are attacked. The same people who you were supposed to fight in the first case, you have to end up defending. Can you imagine the children of Israel, the armies, what was going through their minds individually as Joshua told them that they have to now get up and go to defend Gibeon? You understand the opportunity for grumbling and criticizing and fault finding, blaming, it wasn't for Uno, we wouldn't have to be doing this. When we get it wrong and now we have to go fight. Have you ever thought of just how different life would be if you had not done so and so? You can fill in the blanks. If I had just made the right decisions, things would be better now. Have you ever said that? Perhaps you have made choices that have had a negative impact on your family or your relationships. Or perhaps the foolish decision was not yours, but you're fighting the battle of your life because of the mistake someone else made. Perhaps your spouse made a financial decision that had terrible consequences. Perhaps an accident had occurred, no fault of yours, that has left you physically challenged. Or maybe it isn't anybody's fault. Maybe it's just an illness. Maybe circumstances have conspired to demolish your dreams. And maybe you're thinking, why me? Maybe after years of trying, you have come to believe the goals you once entertained unattainable. Maybe you're at a place where you're saying, it's just you end up blaming yourself, or blaming others, or blaming God. You spend so much emotional energies whining about how unfair life is, or whose fault it was, or how stupid you were, that you descend into bitterness and you become defeated. You continue the cycle of defeat because of the state of your mind. You have lost sight of who the real enemy is. But when we look at Joshua, I can just put myself there and imagine, because it says, when he left Gilgal in verse 7, he and all the warriors with him, and God told him that he should not be afraid. He says, Joshua came upon them suddenly by marching all night from Gilgal. Now, if you know the map of right in the Middle East there, east of the Jordan, maybe about 20 miles north of where Jerusalem is now. And they are marching due southeast. It's about 14 or so miles to Gibeon. And geography tells us it is 4,000 feet in elevation, 1,000 feet to Gibeon. You can imagine the soldiers blaming Joshua, Joshua blaming himself. But Joshua didn't do that, did he? Because God said to him, do not fear them. I have given them into your hands. None of them shall stand before you. What I want to bring out to you is, the situation tell you one thing, and you may have good right to start the blame game. You may have every right to feel disappointed and dejected, but Joshua chose to believe the word of God. He put it above his circumstance, and so they marched all night. Satan knows that the psychological war is the most difficult, and it is the most effective, I should add. If you can shift your attention, if he can shift your attention from the real enemy, he will have you going around in a circle, never really seeing where you ought to be going. In the book of 2 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 10, it says, though we walk in the flesh, we are not engaging in war according to the flesh. For the weapon